Thank you. A pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I congratulate the member for Luton South for obtaining this debate, and I agree and share her sentiments. I think I can speak with some experience. I can say that in Parliament here. Others are equally experienced, but I have first contested an election in winter 1974. I have contested elections since 1982 at every level: local authority, Scottish Parliament, United Kingdom Parliament, and indeed European Parliament. I've contested rural seats and in particular urban and deprived seats, so I think I have some experience. Have I seen electoral fraud? Yes, but I have to say in almost 50 years' experience I can count on the fingers of one hand the number of instances in which it has occurred. There are, of course, many apocryphal tales. I've heard them mentioned, sometimes from my own side, sometimes by others, about keys being used so that empty flats would have polling cards taken, about staff in care homes taking the residents. None of them actually bore any scrutiny. So does electoral fraud happen? Yes, we know, and I've seen what's the situation in Northern Ireland, sadly, but that is not the situation either in Scotland or certainly south of the border. And that's why this position being taken by the government is in fact creating a worse situation for democracy. Because what we should be doing as parliamentarians is encouraging people to participate in the franchise. Although the elections that just took place in Holyrood didn't go the way I would have wished, I very much welcome that despite the fears that many of us had, turnout increased. That can only be a good thing for democracy. Similarly, we have seen the turnout when I first participated back in 1974 is something we'd be delighted to attain in these days. So I think what we have to be doing is to try and ensure that we encourage participation, not discourage it. Now, I have been fortunate in my political life to meet with Professor Henry Milner. I think he's probably still alive. He's a very old man, but I remember him speaking to me and lecturing me and giving me a copy of his book, Civic Literacy, which is a fascinating study I would recommend to any member. He compares and contrasts why you have high turnouts, for example, in places such as Finland and indeed Scandinavia, and lower turnouts in places such as Australia or indeed even in Belgium, in countries where in fact it is mandatory and can be a criminal offence not to vote. He explains that in fact it's not about being able to vote at Tesco's, it's not about being given a free pen or whatever else. What matters is understanding and knowledge and awareness that people have to appreciate what it is they are voting. So it's not a simple, straightforward matter, and I accept that the turnout will not necessarily be put in blame of impediments, but because clearly the matter of encouraging people to vote, as he mentioned, as we all know, people have stood in the blazing sun in South Africa to vote for the end of apartheid, despite, as I say, the difficulties in getting to vote. And we saw even in the United States that people took ages to vote, went through difficulties and great delay, but did so. That said, we have to remember that as well as the lessons from Professor Milner about raising political awareness, about education, about civic literacy, by which he means situations such as public service broadcasting and access to a broader open media, there is about making it as easy as possible to vote, and this goes against that, and that's why it's counterproductive. It's not as flagrant as what we see in the United States, but let's remember that what we see in the United States is something utterly shameful. What we see in the voter suppression that was practised by those supporting President Trump and his attempts to rig the ballot to remain in office is something that came about after Reconstruction at the end of the Civil War, when those who could not retain ownership of people through slavery sought their right to ensure that they could retain it through rigging the ballot box. And sadly, voter suppression continues in the United States. This is about voter suppression. It's for that reason that those who represent minorities have continued to express their concerns. Members may shake their heads, but it's not me in simply taking the advice from the likes of the Electoral Reform Society, who I view as neutral and would support. This also comes from organisations such as MenCap. It comes from Crisis. It comes from those who represent the most vulnerable. And I have to say, and I look back with pride, people sometimes have criticised the referendum in Scotland, but it was truly startling. More people voted in the independence referendum than voted in any election to the Scottish Parliament since. On that basis, this is a counterproductive thing that discourages voting and is fundamentally wrong.
Thank you very much.